This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Pittsburgh to Scranton, from Erie to Philadelphia, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mara Donnelly. Mara, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Why, they had a huge election in Canada.
They did.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
That first time in 10 years they have a change. I think
No,
that's awesome.
once every 5 years, minimum, once every 5 years. But the Liberals, who had almost been decimated as a federal party, now are back in power.
Came roaring back.
And Justin Trudeau rode his father's name to victory.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how the developments transpire north of the border.
Absolutely.
Well, and one of the major issues in Canada, of course, has been the budget. And, of course, we still don't have a budget, do we, in Pennsylvania?
No, we don't. We're over 100 days.
One of the big issues regarding that budget, as you know and we've talked about, is pensions, right?
Yep.
And who better to talk about the state
Nobody
pension
better.
problem but Eugene DePasquale, the State Auditor General. General, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for having me back, because I know I've been on before, so I appreciate the opportunity every time.
We love having you, and we're still going to keep having you back. So.
Well, as we were talking about a moment ago, the state is still struggling to develop a budget.
Right.
And one of the issues behind that, the disagreements, is the pension problem. And our viewers hear about the pension problem. We thought we would ask you to come on to educate our viewers about the pension problem. First of all, what pensions are we talking about? And then I'm going to turn you over to Mara.
Sure.
But what pensions are we looking at?
When it comes to the state budget, the real fight seems to be over the state pension, which would be your state workers and public school employees. And that's distinct from the separate issue that I've been raising, which is on the municipal side, where we have, about an $8 billion municipal pension unfunded liability on our local governments across Pennsylvania. But the fight certainly right now, as part of the budget battle, is on the state pension, which is state workers, and for our public school employees. And each one of those challenges that you have from both the state pensions and the municipal pension, even though from the viewer standpoint, the dollar figures are big, but how you got to the challenge on both is incredibly different in both circumstances.
And did you say $8 billion on the municipal side?
On the municipal side,
okay.
That's correct.
Well, let's start from the basics. How did we get here? How did the municipalities get to this point?
Yeah, Pennsylvania has more municipal pension plans than the rest of the country combined. So we have a lot of pension plans.
How did that come about?
And it's because every one of our local governments has their own pension. In a lot of states, that's maybe by geography, maybe all the municipal pension plans are done by a county basis, or every cop or firefighter has a statewide pension plan for those. So in Pennsylvania, every municipality will sometimes not just have one, but have two or three. So you'll have your police officer, if you have a paid fire department, and your non-uniform will all have separate pension funds. Now, if you obviously have volunteer, that you don't have that one. But so that's part of it. So we have an incredible amount of pensions in Pennsylvania at the municipal level. And here's the problem. Some municipalities are doing quite well. They've had smart investment. They put enough money in. They had a low fee structure. They were conservative in anticipating rate of return. And they're not in distress. And then we have some that are in absolutely terrible shape. City of Chester's non-uniform pension plan, about 10% funded. The firefighters in the city of Scranton, 16% funded.
Wow. So it's not everybody who reaches that $8 billion. It's just a few of the municipalities, or about how many?
Well, about 46% of the pension plans are in some level of distress. Okay. When it comes to the $8 billion, Pittsburgh and Philly are the bigger dollar amounts. But here's something to keep in mind, and that is, and simply just because they're the bigger municipalities.
Larger, right.
But neither one of them are in the top 10 as far as the unfunded percentage. So you have some smaller municipalities. Scranton is not nearly the size of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Scranton actually, from a financial position, is in significantly worse shape.
Oh, boy. So it sounds like there weren't any best practices being utilized across the state.
Interesting enough, we saw a model that may not even want to call it a model, but it's the Pennsylvania Municipal Retirement System. And the city of Harrisburg, with all their financial challenges, they put 2 of their 3 pension plans in this about 20 years ago. Well, those 2 pension plans are now over 100% funded because they did a lot of those best practices, which is they put the right amount of money in. They didn't promise benefits they couldn't pay for. They had a more conservative rate of return, and they had a much more conservative fee structure. So what ended up happening was, over 20 years, they got back to where those 2 pension funds are quite stable right now. But the ones that anticipate a 9% return but get 3 to 4, that only gets you further behind. And ones that have more, and you have the city of Pittsburgh. It's not the current mayor's fault, not the current council's fault, not the current police and firefighters' fault, but they have more retirees than they have active workers because the city just isn't as big as it used to be, and so there's less people paying into the fund as well. All of those create, some of the challenges that we have in Pennsylvania at the municipal level.
Wow.
But when did the municipal pension problem actually begin? Could you pinpoint a couple year period when it began, and who was supposed to be writing herd on it? Former auditor generals or the legislature, the governor? What's happened here?
The problem you have is that there really was no accountability across the board. I mean, so at the end of the day, it's easy to sort of, well, this person could have done more, but there's no real person that's in charge of this. I mean, it just sort of happens at the municipal level and really has been building. The problem's been building for 3 decades, and it only came to light because I kept getting our weekly municipal pension audit reports, and I kept seeing these unfunded liability, and I simply asked the question, has anybody ever added up the total unfunded liability? Not exactly a JFK, ask not what your country can do for you line, but that I asked that.
Still important and relevant.
And the short answer was no one had ever done that, and that's how we got to the 8 billion figure, because the numbers had always been there, but no one just ever totaled up the number.
Can this be fixed?
Yes, it can be fixed, but it's not going to be overnight. I mean, we put forward a host of recommendations to the governor and to the legislature. We believe that anybody that's in distress, that has a high fee structure, the Pennsylvania Municipal Retirement System should take over the management of that program. So it's not merging the funds. It's not merging any of the cities, but it's taking over the management. Take, for example, City of Reading. Their fee structure is $4,000 per member per year. And they're not even beating the market. So that's money that's just basically being thrown away.
Oh, boy.
And so you think PMRS, Pennsylvania Municipal Retirement System, they're actually beating the market. And again, they're not perfect either, but I want to make, they're actually beating the market at $250 per member. City of Reading not beating the market, $4,000 per member. I mean, it's bad governance.
Is there going to be a need for some sort, with an $8 billion price tag, is there going to be a need for some sort of bailout or assistance in solving this issue?
There already is a form of assistance now, and it's from a 1984 law, which is state aid. So there is state aid that goes to municipalities to help them pay for their municipal obligation on an annual basis. We think a whole bunch of structural changes need to be taken place. So this is not just about money. I've been on this show before. Sometimes money can be part of a discussion on how you improve things, but it should only ever be part of a discussion. And it also needs to be about how do you spend that money and what are some of the structural changes that need to take place. So should that formula, what is known as the Act 205 formula, should that be reworked to try to be more helpful to some of the cities that have more retirees and active workers? The answer is yes, but only if it happens in conjunction with all the other reforms we're calling for.
Because you're never going to get out of the $8 billion hole if you don't fix the system.
You keep putting money in and don't change any of the structures, you're just going to end up back where you came from. Only the liability will actually end up worse.
Is anybody pushing back on this? Anybody giving you grief about the need for this?
Politics, you always get grief by somebody, but on this one, nobody's disputing there's
the numbers.
That number's real. Now, some will say, with good justification, that $8 billion isn't due tomorrow, and so that's certainly a fair point. Right. But everyone that I've talked to, and I don't even want to say concedes because it's not like that they were pushing back. Everyone recognizes this is a challenge, problem, whatever for phrase or adjective you want to use. Everyone recognizes that. Obviously, there's a big discussion about what you do. But I want to say that both the bargaining units involved in this, meaning your police and firefighters and SEIU asked me on the municipal side, and the governor's office and the legislature, this is unlike the budget. There is a broad recognition that they need to come to some agreement and compromise on this, and digging their heels in is not going to solve
Have
this.
they coalesced around your recommendations? Are they going to run with them?
I would say that of our recommendations, again, this is sort of a roundabout number, that about 75% of that people are just saying, yes, absolutely, we need to do that. Now, there's some groups who want to rework some of the issues with the Pennsylvania municipal retirement system. There's a debate about whether 70% should be the threshold or 60%. Mm-hmm. We're really debating the edges of the recommendations, but the broad form of the recommendations is pretty widespread agreement.
What does it mean for the average person who's in these pension systems that are in trouble? Are they going to see reduced benefits, or what's going to happen?
Well, a couple of things. Number one is those are legal obligations. So if you're a retiree, they minus whatever happened in Detroit, and I don't foresee that here. We're actually trying to make sure that doesn't happen here. Okay. Minus something happening like what happened in Detroit, people are going to get their benefit. This is about making sure the cities are more sustainable moving forward, and that the mayors don't have to make choices of, do I just pay into the retirement system and not hire cops, or make my city less safe, and et cetera. So the real big issue is, what do we do going forward, minus some Detroit-style issue, which if we do this right, that won't happen.
Okay.
What about the consequences for the residents of some of the cities that are in the worst situations? What are the ramifications for them, or is it possible to tell yet?
Here's what will happen if it's not addressed. If it's not addressed, you're going to either have less safe communities or higher taxes. Because what's going to happen is, what I mean by less safe is, those mayors just won't have the ability to hire more cops and firefighters. Mm-hmm. So I say that is the worst case scenario if it's not addressed proactively. But that's what would happen.
Do you see any municipalities reducing their police force now and falling back on the smaller ones and falling back on state police protection instead?
That's already happening.
Yeah.
That's already happening.
That's already
major
happening.
consolidation efforts. So
And
that's
so
got to be part of it.
It's a shifting of the budget, essentially, the budgetary
Correct.
burden there.
Yeah, that is not going to happen. That is happening.
Okay. Mara?
Well, I think that that there's a lot that can be done. Do you have any key points that were made in your report recently that the municipalities are going to be looking at?
Yeah, there's the Pennsylvania municipal retirement system, and going into that's a key point of that. The other part is the 205 formula. Okay. That is this part where the cities could end up.
And that is a component of your recommendation.
That is, okay. Well, we say the formula has to be reworked. Because you have to address the idea that there's some cities, through no fault of their own. In Pittsburgh in 1960, you had 700,000 people living there. Today it's a little bit above 300,000. Their civilian workforce is just less than it was then. Mm-hmm. Because of that, that's not the current mayor or council or police or firefighters' fault. That's just a natural course of it. So how do you try to help them with that situation when you have more retirees and you have active members?
Oh.
In the last few seconds of the program, have you had the opportunity? Are there other auditor generals across the United States that have been dealing with something similar that you've been able to compare notes?
There's a yes and a no. The yes is on the statewide pensions, yes. But the municipal side, we're such an aberration with how we do this that there's really not a lot of other models. The only one that even comes close is Illinois, and that actually the current auditor just retired there, and the legislature picks the auditor there, so they're in the process of getting a new one. But most states don't have the sheer number of pensions we have, so we're kind of an outlier on that one.
Well, General, we want to invite you back. Maura and I would like to talk with you, I know, about many of your other projects, and we just don't have enough time today.
Love to do it. Absolutely. We'll have me. Look forward to being back.
Okay.
That'd be great.
And we'll be back with a second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this. Stay tuned.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment of Behind the Headlines, Mara and I are happy to welcome former state senator Mike Brubaker, who is now the president and CEO of Blackford Ventures and a member of the Susquehanna Valley Center board. Welcome back.
It's great to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to have you, Senator.
Blackford Ventures has studied the state pension problem for some time. We were wondering if we could start out with your perspective, Mike, if you disagreed or agreed with most of what the Auditor General had to say.
The people of Pennsylvania elected our Auditor General. That's the way we do it here. I had the privilege of sitting in the studio when he was being interviewed by you. By the way, you guys did a great job of asking him, the right questions. I think the people of Pennsylvania got it right in electing him. He's a sharp guy.
Yeah.
We're from opposite parties. I'm a Republican, he's a Democrat. That doesn't mean we can't like each other and respect each other. I think he's doing a fantastic job. That report that he did was done promptly, efficiently, professionally, in a bipartisan way. He talked about the fact that Pennsylvania has more pension programs than the other 49 states put together.
He did say that. Yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
Staggering.
Yeah.
So you're asking me differences. My knee-jerk reaction was I didn't hear anything that he said I disagree with. Now I give it a little bit of thought. I want to challenge him and you and the viewers to say we don't have a pension problem. We have a pension crisis. And I think he used the term problem, he and you used the term problem here. I think in his report, he uses the term crisis. And the reason why I want to shift the conversation to crisis, unfortunately, many times our government, state government, local government, our United States Congress, doesn't act on issues until they're at crisis proportion. And that's a whole different topic for a different time.
So true.
Yeah.
It
is so true.
And if $8 billion is not a crisis, I don't know what is.
That's $8 billion on the municipal level. And I don't know how many of your viewers know what a municipality is. I'm sure a majority do. But if I may...
They live in one. They probably live in one, but don't really realize.
No doubt they do. So Pennsylvania has 67 counties, and within counties are townships, cities, and boroughs. So we think of townships, cities, and boroughs as municipalities. Another term we use frequently is local government. So I live in Lancaster County, right, not too far from the airport. I have a Lidditz address. Lidditz is a borough, but I live in Warwick Township. So Lidditz Borough is a municipality. Warwick Township is a municipality. Many people that live in my community, if they have a Lidditz address, believe they live in Lidditz. They might live in Meehan Township. They might live in Ephrata. They might live in Clay. We have a lot of municipalities. But the fact that we have all of these pension programs, 46% are not adequately funded, is a crisis. And then when to his credit, he and his team, I can't credit the Auditor General enough. I really like him as a human being, and I think he's professional and on point, focused, high ethics, high morals. So that's the kind of person we need in office. So now he pulls this report together, and for the first time ever, we have a number, $8 billion. So it's no longer a problem, it's a crisis, and it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed now. And then two ways to fix it. One is we've dug this $8 billion hole, so we need to fill the hole. And then at the same time, rather than A and B, at the same time, the General Assembly should make the changes, in my opinion, that the Auditor General articulated in his report.
And that has to do with a couple different things, including the Act 205 and solutions. And they want to. He has some structural changes that he's recommending in his report.
So here in government, we use all these terms all the time that the viewers back home don't know. So yes, so Act 205, that is an act. Once you pass a bill, then it becomes an act. And that act, it has a formula, and the Auditor General mentioned that formula. He said the formula needs to be changed, and I think he's right.
And it's a funding formula.
That's correct.
For municipalities.
That's correct.
Okay.
So if you're a municipality or a local government or a township or a borough, you're getting Act 205 money to help you pay for your pension obligation. The Blackford proposal, Richard Welkowitz owns Blackford, and Richard came up with this concept. Why don't we?
So you're making a
Transition.
transition here, and the transition is that in addition to looking over the Auditor General's shoulders and observing what they're doing, and you have a good vantage point from which to do that because you're the former chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and you have a lot of experience with this, Mike. But your company also has some ideas about how the state can address this then.
We do. So our proposal, and again, it's a solution, not the solution.
Yeah.
So we'd welcome solutions from all across the state to offer local governments solutions on how they can fill the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And the General Assembly has to take action at changing how we calculate pensions. As you said, when I was in the state General Assembly, I was chair of the Senate Finance Committee, and I attempted, I introduced bills, could not get them passed, to change our pension system from a defined benefit to a defined contribution. That's a structural change.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a pretty significant change that a lot of people don't understand, defined benefit versus defined contribution. And so I'm going to ask our guest to explain the difference between the two, but there's been a big shift in a lot of different areas, in healthcare, in pensions, to move to a defined contribution plan rather than the old defined benefit plan.
Right, so for our viewers back home again, what is a pension? So there's an awful lot of viewers that don't get pensions, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So pension. So if you're fortunate enough to have a job, you work, fortunate enough to get paid $500 a week, and you have that job for 20 years, you retire. An awful lot of people at the end of retirement, their pay stops. If you have a pension, this is a very simplistic way for me to think about it. If you have a pension, a part of the money that you make during your employment goes into this savings account, and then your employer, in this case, if we're talking about the state, will put additional money in beyond your pay, and then that fund goes to pay that retired person for the rest of their life, a weekly or monthly check. There's an awful lot of people working don't get that. So a defined benefit says we're gonna put a certain amount of money into a pot, regardless of the yield, the financial yield in the marketplace. That's a defined benefit, a predetermined benefit, a promise, a contractual obligation, as the Auditor General called it. The other way to calculate it is recognizing that the markets ebb and flow. So as markets decline, there's less money going into your pension because it's just less money there. And as markets grow, you could get more money going in. But that way, then what's coming into your pension account is totally reflective and in line with the current economy. You have a defined benefit, you can be out of line with the current economy, and therefore you grow this unfunded liability. And that's what's happened in the past. We've had some bad decisions on how to increasing pensions from prior General Assemblies that have helped to grow it. Roughly 50% of this unfunded balance came from, in my opinion, mismanagement or bad decisions of the past. The other 50% came from market fluctuations. We can fix both of those. The General Assembly can fix both of those. But right now we have this unfunded liability at the local government level of $8 billion. We at Blackford Ventures would like we're in the process of telling all the local governments of Pennsylvania, there's 562 of them that have unfunded liability. We will essentially give you a loan We're a private company, private equity company. We'll give a local government a loan and use the Act 205 monies that we talked about that you're going to get in from the state every month, every quarter, every year. That money comes in. That's what you use to pay us back. And that way, we can, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, we can give you enough money to take your unfunded liability and take it the whole way up to fully funded. And when your unfunded liability gets fully funded, now all of a sudden your credit rating agencies that evaluate your credit market risk are impressed that you're fully funded. Now you get a better credit score. Now if you as a local government need to go out and borrow money for some other reason, to buy a new park or whatever the people want, you can borrow money at a cheaper rate. So it's a win-win-win the whole way around.
Okay, it sounds to me like this is a no-brainer. You've got the combination of the structural changes that the Auditor General is suggesting. You've got Blackford Ventures' proposal to fill the $8 billion hole. It sounds like the two in combination, really, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I would think you would have huge success with this. Are there any drawbacks? Are you hitting any resistance from any of the municipalities that you're talking to?
I think it's a no-brainer too.
I knew you would.
You know, if the local governments use the 205 money that they're getting from the state to pay this loan, I call it a loan, that we as a private company would be making to them, I think it's safe.
Are all municipalities eligible for 205 money, Act 205 money?
All the 562 that have an unfunded
because they're
obligation.
distressed municipalities?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense then.
How long ago did Blackford Ventures develop this idea, Mike?
This was Richard's concept. Richard's a brilliant man. He's been in business for 47 years, lives in Lancaster County. So I give Richard a lot of credit. He's just, he comes up with creative, innovative concepts to help people, help companies grow. I was quoted in a magazine recently to say when Richard's in a meeting, he'll find a creative way, not only for a win-win, but a win-win-win-win. So he not only wants the entity that he's negotiating with to come out better. Of course, he'd like for Blackford to come out well, but then he wants the community and the people that touch that surrounding entity to do better as well. So he's very creative. So he's come up with this concept, well, why not create a municipal pension recovery fund internally, and why not drive these private dollars out to local governments and allow the 205 monies to pay us back.
Sounds like the ultimate public-private partnership.
It's exactly correct.
In the last 15 seconds, have you had any reaction from the governor or from the leaders of the four caucuses at this point?
Yeah, it's all been positive. It's a private sector solution. We work cooperatively with the lending institutions. We're not conflicting with lending institutions, so it's a cooperative effort between the private company and lending institutions from across the Commonwealth and the country, for that matter.
Mike, Maura, the time has gone much too fast.
Always.
We're just beginning to delve into this and look at this interesting idea. Mike, we want to thank you so much for being with us today. And we will be back with all of you again next week on Behind the Headlines. Tune in then. We'll see you.